Thank you for joining us today. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Public Policy Institute of California, or PPIC. And for those of you who are not familiar with PPIC, we are a nonpartisan, non-profit think tank with offices in San Francisco and in Sacramento. PPIC has just released this morning a new report titled English as a Second Language in California's Community Colleges, as authored by researchers Olga Rodriguez, Sarah Bone, Laura Hill, Bonnie Brooks, and with research support from Sergio Sanchez and Stephanie Puegas. I probably butchered that, and I apologize. We'd like to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the College Futures Foundation. Oops, sorry. I've touched something, and I won't do that again. And the Sutton Family Fund for our support of this work and today's event. You should have received a copy of the report on your chair, and there are some additional copies at the registration table. The report, along with the slides from today's presentation, are now available online at ppic.org. For today's program, we're going to first hear from Bonnie Brooks, who will present the main findings of the report. And then Olga will moderate a discussion with a fantastic panel of experts. For time, we actually have the bios on the back of your agendas, and so I look at them. We have a distinguished panel. And finally, you should have plenty of time for question and answers, and we want to remind you that we are live broadcasting this, so please wait for the microphones to come before you ask your question. Let's see. So please note that there are a couple things before we begin. Later today, you'll receive a survey. We're known for our surveys. We really appreciate your responses on those surveys, not just about the beer bread. I know that's pretty popular, but about the presentation and the panel. Our higher ed team also would like to encourage you that we do have a higher ed blog, and if you're interested in higher ed issues, please go on to ppic.org and sign up for that blog. I think there's a contest. Somebody gets a statue, so work on that. And lastly, please turn off or silence your cell phone. This report resonated with me on several levels. Of course, it's a continuation of our important work on general developmental education reform, work that we've been doing for many years, and that work has informed important bills like AB 705. But for me, it's most striking that the ESL student is generally a very resilient student. And as our earlier work pointed out, navigating California's higher education system is difficult for even English speakers. Navigating into somewhere English as a second language is even more daunting. It's important to note that ESL students may have, their competency in English may not be a reflection of this subject matter competency, and that makes this group of students very unique. As for me, this is very personal. My husband and I have several family members from Mexico who have attended the community college system, some seekers of degrees and some not. My sister-in-law is currently seeking a teaching certificate as we speak, and so I hear a lot about her homework and her assignments. And as someone who has butchered Spanish for decades, despite years of study, and these students and educators continue to amaze me. So I'm excited to hear from the panel today in the discussion about the challenges, but also the opportunities. I'd like to now introduce PPIC Associate Bonnie Brooks. Her research focuses on developmental education and career technical education at the community college level. Welcome, Bonnie.
Sorry about one less thing for me to do. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking a few key people without whom this research would not be possible. So first, again, I would like to thank our funders. I'd also like to thank the California Community College Chancellor's Office for granting our team access to their student longitudinal database, which is very important data for us. I'd also like to thank the faculty and department chairs that we interviewed for our research, who provided us very invaluable insights. And I'd also like to thank our esteemed panelists today, who will be contributing to a very important discussion. And I'd also like to thank everybody here today for your interest in this work. So without any further ado, let's begin. So the California Community College system educates the largest number of underserved students in the state, especially non-native speakers of the English language. We see tens of thousands of ESL students enroll in ESL courses, and a lot of students come in with goals with either to improve their English speaking abilities or to pursue degrees and even transfer to the four-year universities. And so this presents the community colleges with a unique opportunity to facilitate the social and economic mobility of these students. So the thing, though, is that there's very little information that's known about what ESL programs look like across the system, and moreover, how students are doing in these programs. So the purpose of our research is to provide insights into what these ESL programs look like across the system, who are the students that are being served by these programs, and what ESL program features are associated with either helping or hindering student success. Our research is particularly timely given the current statewide and grassroots reforms that are currently underway in the space. So I'll begin with a quick overview of the current landscape of ESL in the state. So colleges have been reforming in the ESL space for quite some time, but the recent passage of a law known as AB 705 has largely been regarded as a catalyst for change in the space. And generally speaking, AB 705 requires colleges to reform how they place students in remedial coursework. But specifically what this means for AB 705 is that colleges are mandated to maximize the likelihood that a student in credit ESL, that is, credit-bearing courses that students pay for, so maximizing the likelihood that these students complete transfer-level English within 3 years. Colleges are also mandated to utilize assessment and placement policies that maximize that likelihood. And finally, implement reforms that will maximize this probability by fall 2020. So the thing to note here is that the AB 705 legislation targets a very specific group of ESL students, namely students that have goals to seek a degree or transfer, as well as students that enroll in coursework that leads to transfer-level English. So because of this, the focus of our study is on these degree-seeking group of students. So who exactly are our degree-seeking students? First, we have our general ESL population, which is comprised of students that first enroll in the community colleges between the 2009-10 and 2014-15 academic years and have been enrolled in at least one ESL course. So this totals to around 356,000 students roughly. We then break down our general ESL population into 3 groups. The first is what we define as non-sequence students, and these are students that never take a course, an ESL course, that's required to reach transfer-level English. And they comprise a slight majority of our general ESL population at 53%. Next, we have our sequence students, and these are students that take at least one required ESL course to transfer-level English. And then finally, we have our degree-seeking students. And these are students that are a subset of our sequence students, but they additionally take at least one degree-applicable course in any discipline and at least one developmental math or English course. And so we see that these students comprise about 1/3 of our general ESL population, and these students are the focus of our study. So what do our ESL degree seekers look like? These 3 waffle charts present 3 important demographic characteristics for our degree seekers, and I'll be highlighting the largest groups in each of these categories. So as we can see, degree seekers tend to be Asian, Latino, or white, tend to hold some sort of permanent residency, student visa status, or US citizenship, and are also coming in with some sort of foreign high school education or US high school education. And our panel today will discuss the implications of having such a large group of students that are not graduating from US high schools or otherwise don't have US high school records for AB 705 guidance placement. And it's also important to note the education and immigration-related differences across racial and ethnic groups. Namely, we see that Latino students are more likely than any other race or ethnic group to be US citizens and to be US educated. So now that we have a general understanding of what our ESL degree seekers look like, what do the sequences they take to transfer-level English look like across the system? So using our PPIC developed database of individual college ESL sequences, we're able to illustrate how the most common sequence features that are currently being offered by colleges has been improving upon the more traditional ways of offering ESL in the past. So first, we see that colleges are majority of colleges are implementing integrated sequence designs. And this entails teaching English skills, namely reading and writing, in a single course per level of the sequence. And we can see that this varies greatly from a more traditional way of offering ESL, where each of these English skills were taught as separate standalone courses, with both courses being required by the student to complete ESL and reach transfer level English. Next, we see a majority of colleges are allowing students to enroll directly into transfer level English upon completing the ESL sequence. And we see that this is different from the more traditional model of ESL, where a student would need to complete additional coursework in developmental English before being able to reach transfer level English. And finally, we see that colleges are offering the highest levels of their ESL sequences as credits that are redeemable towards transfer to UC CSU and are also degree applicable. So given that these are the three most common ways that colleges are reforming their ESL sequences, we focus on the effect of these three features on improving or on helping or hindering student outcomes. So given that AB 705 is requiring colleges to ensure credit ESL students can complete transfer level English in 3 years, our ESL sequence structure is currently conducive to this. So here we have the percent of colleges that are offering a given number of levels in the sequence, and almost half, about 48% of colleges are currently offering ESL sequences that are 5 levels or less. So this is theoretically allowing students to complete transfer level English within the AB 705 timeframe of 3 years. However, we see the most common number of levels in a sequence is 6, and this is just short of the AB 705 mandate. However, the good news is that when we see where students actually start in the ESL sequence, we see that they start 2 to 4 levels below transfer. So they're starting a lot closer to transfer level English. So this suggests that colleges could conceivably shorten their ESL sequences with relative ease. And so even if colleges are offering sequences that are 5 levels or less, and even if students are starting closer to transfer level English, is this still enough for the system to be maximizing the likelihood that a student can complete transfer level English in 3 years? So when we look at throughput, which is the share of a group of students that completes transfer level English, we see that only 34% of students are completing transfer level English within 6 years. And this varies greatly depending on where a student starts in the sequence. So using our aforementioned database in combination with our student-level longitudinal data, we're able to illustrate the progression of ESL students through the transfer level, or through the ESL sequence through transfer level English over 6 years. So I'll be walking you through how to interpret this chart. So first, each level or each line represents the progression of a group of students that starts in a given level of the sequence. So here we highlight students that start 2 levels below transfer because they can theoretically complete transfer level English within 1.5 years. And we also choose to highlight students that start 5 levels below transfer because they can theoretically complete transfer level English within 3 years, which is the AB 705 timeframe. So next, we see each point along the line represents the share of these respective group of students that make it to the next level in the sequence. So to take students that start 2 levels below transfer as an example, out of 100% of students that start in this level, or 100 students, we see 86 end up completing the 2 levels below coursework, 62 end up moving on to the next course in the sequence, and we see 56 students complete that course in the sequence. And then we see another 56 enroll in transfer level English, and then finally 51 completing transfer level English. So out of 100 students that started 2 levels below, we see only 51 end up making it through transfer level English. And we see when we compare the completion rates of students that start 2 levels below and those that start 5 levels below, there's more than a 30 percentage point difference. So this essentially illustrates that the more levels that a student needs to go through, the more exit points there are for that student. And they're thus less likely to complete transfer level English. But this also highlights how just offering a sequence that could theoretically allow a student to complete transfer level English within 3 years isn't necessarily enough to maximize the probability that a student can. So our analysis also finds that our 3 key ESL features that I mentioned before are all associated with increasing the likelihood that a student can complete transfer level English within 6 years. So more specifically, we see that those students that take transferable ESL courses are 20.4 percentage points more likely to complete transfer level English than those that never take a transferable ESL course. And similarly, those students that are enrolled in a sequence that feeds directly into transfer level English are similarly more likely to complete than those that enroll in sequences that feed into developmental English. And then similarly, those students that enroll in integrated coursework are more likely to complete transfer level English than those that enroll in traditional coursework. And we also see that these 3 features also improve the likelihood for students to complete transfer level English across racial and ethnic lines to a similar degree, with Black students appearing to benefit the most from these 3 sequence features. And we also find that transferable ESL is also associated with increased transferable credit accumulation, as well as degree completion in the long term. So given the quantitative findings presented today, we recommend colleges implement reforms that show promise for students, namely to shorten ESL sequences, as we see this is a viable first step for colleges to move towards reform. We also see that, again, our transferable ESL courses, integrated approaches, as well as sequences that feed directly into transfer level English are all associated with positive student outcomes. And we also recommend a few things just based off of what we heard from our faculty that we interviewed for our research. Namely, that colleges provide seamless connections between non-credit and credit ESL, especially given that we find that 20% of our colleges are offering non-credit courses as part of a sequence to transfer level English. And we also hear from faculty that non-credit coursework will increasingly become more important in the post-AB 705 world. We also suggest to colleges to ensure that their assessment and placement policies are effective, accurate, as well as equitable, especially given what faculty have told us about how assessment and placement reforms can help support the effective structural reforms on improving student outcomes. And we also recommend that the reforms that colleges implement are also ensuring that all ESL students have the opportunity to pursue a degree of transfer, especially given the fact that we see that a majority of our ESL population to begin with never takes a course that leads to transfer level English. So to summarize, our ESL students comprise a critical thread of the fabric of California's communities. And the community colleges serve as a launch pad for the future of these students and their families for years to come. So thank you all for your attention. If you guys have any questions for the research team, we'll be here available after the program. But now I'm going to turn it over to Olga Rodriguez, who will be moderating a panel of esteemed colleagues on the future of AB 705 in relation to ESL.
Invite our panel to join. Should we go? Yeah. You're welcome to join. Great. So I want to start by thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here. Like Bonnie said, this is a very important topic, and it serves a lot of students on community colleges and has the potential to really impact students' lives, especially immigrant English language learners, adult English learners. So we're really excited about this. And so for today's panel, we're really excited that we have representatives from the system office as well as faculty leaders participating through the California Acceleration Project and CATISO, the professional development organization, to discuss our research as well as discuss the implications moving forward as colleges work to implement AB 705. So there's this critical opportunity to be able to also provide some insight as colleges are considering these changes on their campus. So to my right, we have Kathryn Wada from Cypress College. She's involved in AB 705 at her campus as well as the statewide and was key in having ESL incorporated into legislation. We also have Melissa Reeve, who is an ESL faculty member at Cypress College, and she is also at Solano College, and so she was also key in informing the legislation, the AB 705. And she's also leading professional development efforts through the California Acceleration Project for ESL. And Alice Perez, representing the Chancellor's office and who oversees the AB 705 ESL work group, who is providing guidance to the field on AB 705 implementation. So as you can see, we're really thrilled. They represent some key perspectives across the state and at different levels. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone we're streaming this panel, and so we're going to end with a question and answer. So as you guys have questions, please raise your hand, and our colleagues will be handing you the mic. And so, to begin our discussion, I'd like to just begin with a little bit of background on how ESL made it into the legislation. As some of you may know, AB 705 started as a piece of legislation that addressed critical concerns around math and English assessment and placement, and the length of time it was taking students to get through to transfer level courses. And it wasn't until future revisions of the legislation that ESL was incorporated. And we have here Kathryn Wada and Melissa Reeve that were instrumental in that part of it. So I would like to have Kathy begin by telling us how she worked to advocate for ESL's incorporation into the legislation.
Sure. Part of the driving force behind why we got involved with the legislation and really sought amendment of the language was an equity issue. It was really the inequity of credit ESL students, non-native speakers, being enveloped into the legislation, and which could then be inequitably applied across the colleges. So at the time there were, I think, 113 colleges, and the big question would ESL be included in these AB 705 reforms that were addressed in the law? So ESL students would need to complete within 1 year, or would they not be included? And I think that across the colleges it would be very easy to say, it says English, so of course English as a second language is included. And on the other side of town, it says English, so of course ESL is not included. And I think that was the biggest concern about the language of the law, that it just wasn't clearly delineated for ESL. For me, as a ESL professional for a long time, it is definitely one of my proudest moments, accomplishments of my life ever, that we got into California law the language that distinguishes ESL from developmental English, and also recognizes that students enrolled in ESL courses are engaged in foreign language. This is huge for our field, and you probably heard me up in Sacramento when I was cheering when we got the word that it got into the language. So we were just absolutely thrilled. And then we also had concerns about the 1 year timeline, which I think Melissa is going to develop a little more.
Yeah, so Melissa, if you could tell us a little bit about how the 3-year timeframe came to be for ESL.
Sure. So the legislation was kind of midstream in its drafting process, I think, when CATISL issued their statement and recommended the addition of language specifically calling out ESL, which I think was prescient and important in the ways that Kathy describes. And I had been involved as a participant on the English side with California Acceleration Project since 2012. I teach in both disciplines at my college. And and actually, I had spoken a little bit to the director, Katie Hearn, in sort of around that time about, I'm starting to wonder if ESL is kind of the next wave of this, because the ideas in the acceleration project about each successive level reduces the likelihood that a student will complete, just as you've seen reflected in the data. ESL students, even more so than native speakers, attend long sequences, which also commonly at that time fed then into developmental English, adding additional levels and additional exit points. And so I was just observing that, and I had sort of put that bug in her ear, like, hey, at some point. So anyway, when CATISL, when Kathy and others put forward the language on ESL to include it in the legislation, people from Acceleration Project contacted me and said, this legislation is being written and it's going to accomplish the things that we've been striving for in terms of reducing exit points on the English side, but suddenly there's this ESL monkey wrench. What do we do? So at that time I just served in a consultative function, to say like, no, yeah, 1 year is not appropriate for ESL. And we just talked a little bit about, well, what would be, and so we looked at, of course, starting with my program, which only has 3 levels, but then my program doesn't serve true beginners. So just sort of looking at some of the program models around the state that, kind of what seems to be typical and how are students moving through. And we just landed on the 3 years, 5 semesters of credit ESL as the maximum, feeding into transfer level English. And so that's kind of where that came from, was sort of trying to find the happy medium between reducing exit points, but also allowing for the fact that language learning does take time and students aren't going to do it in 1 year. And I'm grateful that ESL is in the legislation, because even now we do see some colleges struggling with that confusion around, the changes to English being applied to ESL students too.
Mm-hmm. Great. So next we'll talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities in light of AB 705. So as you saw from Bonnie's presentation, so our report finds that colleges are already making great progress in terms of implementing reforms like integration, having sequences lead directly to transfer level English, and offering transfer credit for ESL courses. However, there's still a lot of work to be done. There are still many colleges that are offering traditional approaches, discrete skills, or that have developmental English as part of their pathway to English, to transfer level English. So I wanted to begin with Alice. From your perspective as a system administrator, what do you see as some of the top challenges and opportunities as colleges kind of move forward in implementing some of these reforms? And how do you envision this research helping to inform those changes?
Well, first I want to say on behalf of the entire Chancellor's office and Chancellor Oakley, it's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be with my colleagues who have worked for over a year with a broad-based advisory committee to help serve the field in terms of bringing out guidance, and if there are any regulation language changes that we need in Title V to be able to shepherd those forward. One of the big challenges will still be making sure that the field understands that ESL, AB 705 for our ESL students is not the same as for our English students. And that's, I think, going to be made more and more clear the closer we get to go live. So implementation for AB 705 for ESL is fall 2020. So we are now in a real all hands on deck mode with really explicit guidance and a lot more communication to the field about what they can be building on as they go toward that full implementation. One of the big challenges, I think, is a challenge we currently have, which will also stay with us, which is knowing our students and really understanding their educational goals. And we need to know that because one of the goals, as we've heard from the report, and we're also going to hear more about in our panel time today, is we do have a lot of students engaging ESL classes in the non-credit context. We really don't always know whether or if they have educational goals beyond those sort of discrete non-credit courses, which may be skills building. They may be taking language skills building classes in order to receive higher wages or salaries at their workplace for a host of reasons. So when we talk about one of the goals that PPIC report illuminates is having a seamless transition from non-credit to credit, it's going to be really important to be able to find mechanisms and ways to know our students' educational goals, whether they have them, and to know what options are available. This is something that's part of guided pathways overall in terms of what we're trying to enact and roll out across the state. But for our ESL learners, this is going to be really important. The second big challenge I see, these also are opportunities, like most of our challenges are. They're two sides of a coin. One of the challenges is going to be coming up with really efficacious and viable ways to place our ESL students. And we know that we can't completely carte blanche eliminate all of our placement assessment tools at this point for ESL students because they're not the same as our English and math students. We don't have that high school data coming in. We can't use those GPA default rules like we can with English and math. But we do want to be able to look at some placement modalities that can help students identify for themselves what their background is with English, how they've engaged English learning, how they understand their fluency and their aptitude with the language, and what their goals are. To be able to see, is it possible that we could have a set of guided placement survey tools for our students for ESL, as well as placement tests if we need to keep those. So those are some of the challenges. The opportunities are we're going to get to know our students. We're going to really be intentional about understanding their educational goals, and we're really going to try to match them with pathways that are going to work for them to college level, transfer level English, if that's their goal.
Great. And Melissa and Kathy, can you, from your perspective as faculty leaders on your campus and also working with CAP and CATESL, what challenges and opportunities do you see at, say, the college level or at professional development-wise?
Okay, so I think one of the challenges is with the placement. So I think Alice touched on that, but when colleges have been planning for the implementation for the English and math side, which is fall 19, some colleges have repurposed or shuttered the doors on their assessment centers with the idea that English assessments for English and math will no longer be, available. And then for ESL, we're kind of going, wait a minute, So that's one of the challenges, definitely for a number of colleges, number of ESL faculty across the state, is how will ESL students be placed effectively into credit ESL courses, not only by identifying them, but also, is there a physical space on campus? Are there the services available for students to be accurately assessed in their language ability to then complete their credit ESL program? So that's one big challenge, I think.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I would say, though we do have some emerging models, which I think are really promising for alternate kinds of assessment in ESL that give agency to the learners, identifying their levels and so on, as Alice referenced. The scale of the data for those initiatives is small. And so if you compare it to, say, English and math, that had a decade's worth of data demonstrating the efficacy of high school transcript data for placement, there's not anything equivalent. So the next couple of years, I think, are going to be an interesting time of innovation and data collection to sort of see, what we can do and what's working. And I think another challenge is going to be just kind of rethinking for many faculty. And again, in our 114 college system, there's probably, I don't know, at least 73 different kinds of program models of ESL programs. But I think, from a professional development standpoint, as I've been working with CAP, persuading faculty in some of the more traditionally structured programs and the ones with longer sequences that just getting your program down to 5 semesters isn't necessarily compliant with AB 705, as the data in this study really shows. Having a program that's technically possible to complete in 6 semesters does not maximize the likelihood that students will or can. And so what does it actually mean? What are the kind of high leverage moves within those sequences that we can make structurally, pedagogically, and so on to actually maximize throughput?
Well, in terms of the opportunities, what AB 705 has opened up for Credit ESL has been huge. So with the language that was included in the amendment of the law, there are 2 prime opportunities. One of them is the direct fulfillment of CSU and UC general education requirements with advanced ESL coursework. The humanities requirement is about the cultural component, and ESL classes, particularly the advanced ESL classes, are full of advanced engagement, rich engagement of cultural topics. And they have the language ability to engage in a very meaningful way in that cultural component. So that's a huge opportunity that has opened up. And what it does is it really advances Credit ESL even beyond the initial goals of AB 705, which was to complete freshman composition. If students are able to fulfill CSU, UC, GE requirements directly with ESL courses, that advances them. I mean, they can just mark off that whole C2 3B box, and that's huge. Another opportunity is with certificates. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, I think, but with certificates for ESL that kind of combine various initiatives that are going on in the state. So that's another opportunity, and a lot of that is the springboard has been the language of the law in AB 705.
If I could just make one global comment related to those, I think that the language in AB 705 that differentiates ESL instruction from remediation or from developmental English, but specifically from remediation, because I think that word carries the connotation I'm thinking of. The exciting opportunity of the law, thinking about it globally, is that it elevates the status of the ESL field, the content of our courses, and the students who are in them. And that's, I think, the most powerful opportunity in this law.
Great. Great. So thinking about acceleration in ESL, some may associate ESL with needing years to learn the language, so which make reforms related to acceleration more difficult to implement in this field. Especially when we think about how it may be unrealistic for students to achieve academic literacy enough to be successful in transfer level English within this time frame. However, colleges are being mandated to maximize the likelihood that they complete transfer level English within 3 years. So thinking about how is the system office and ESL departments across the state thinking about acceleration in light of this new mandate and the 3-year time frame? What are the strategies that they're pursuing, and are they more open to acceleration in ESL as a result of the law?
You know, historically, the word acceleration has had a kind of taint to it that's had a negative cast. I think the work of this advisory committee has been to remove that kind of taint and really embed the notion of acceleration for ESL courses in the coursework itself, and looking at integration as well as having really clear pathways going forward. And some of that has been absent. So if you have a lot of discrete courses, like a 50-minute grammar course, and then you take a 50-minute writing, a 50-minute reading, and having all of those skills unbundled and sequenced in a way that has attenuated and lengthened the student's time to fulfilling and completing this course sequence. So integration has been something that the system office, that the advisory committee has really been promoting from the beginning, way back from our first guidance memo last July. That's all an acceleration strategy to really unpack the curriculum and rethink it and revision it. And as Melissa was saying, yes, you're within AB 705 bounds and you're compliant if it's 5 semesters and then the ultimate semester is your English transfer level course. But that's not the end goal. And so you really want to be able to have students enter at a point in the sequence that's appropriate and efficacious for the placement mechanisms that you've used to place those students, and that they know that they could enter into a part of that sequence that may be one course prior to transfer level English. It's going to be unique for each student. Mm-hmm. But I think the hazard is that colleges will just say, let's put all of our students directly into that initial level in a sequence for credit and just go through 5 levels. And I don't think that's the way we want to go. And I think that's, we're trying to look at acceleration in positive terms of having a clear pathway that students are accurately placed, as well as the integration of the curriculum.
I think for me, coming from working for the California Acceleration Project, so I better talk about acceleration, it's really important to call out, at least in the context of CAP, when we talk about acceleration, we're not talking about just cutting levels off or pushing students along, like go faster. That's not at all. The objective and the professional development that we offer focuses on a pedagogy that really, has several core principles, including integrated reading and writing, backwards design from authentic academic reading and writing tasks, working with book-length texts, doing writing tasks that incorporate ideas from the reading into writing, and a shift in the focus on grammar from one that in a traditional sequence is kind of front-loading and teaching many, many semesters of grammar, and sort of the kind of historic notion that, well, until students can write a good sentence, they can't write a paragraph, and until they can write a paragraph, they can't write an essay. That many of our texts and many of our courses over the years have been designed with that kind of parts to whole theory in mind. Accelerated pedagogy really comes from a whole to parts perspective. Let's start with the complex task and unpack it backwards and figure out how we need to do that. And colleges which have done this have often surprised themselves, or their students have surprised them with being able to do more in less time than they previously could. So some colleges, and I know these are referred to in the study, had developed accordion models, which is a model where there's an A and a B course at each level, and students who do well with an A or a B in the A course skip to the next A course. So essentially they skip a level. Well, that was the original theory of the accordion model design, was that some students will move faster and some will move slower, and we've built sort of a universal design to allow students to move at their own pace. Well, some of these colleges I've interviewed recently, Cuyamaca in San Diego is one, Berkeley City in the Peralta District in the East Bay is another. They started with those models because they so firmly believed that there would be students who needed the A and B course, right? Who would need 6 semesters, 3 levels, A, B, A, B. They're finding that 85, 90% of their students go A to A to A to transfer level English. So they designed a 6-semester sequence that some students could complete in 3. But what they're finding that they now have, because of the changes to their pedagogy, is a 3-semester sequence that some students can take 6, right? A 3-level sequence that some students take in 6. So it's turned out to be that the shift in focus of their pedagogy has actually exceeded their expectations in terms of what students are able to do. So it's not just saying you have less time, go faster. It's how can we refocus our instruction to equip students to make those moves.
And I think one of the key programmatic strategies for ESL, as Alice alluded to, is the idea that ESL students are not the same as developmental English students. So functioning in a foreign language is not the same as functioning in your primary language. And so that change for colleges, that their highest level of ESL went into 2 or more semesters of developmental English before going to transfer level English. I think that was a key major acceleration reform. And it was on a programmatic level. So it really, as colleges move away from that ESL to developmental into transfer level, that is going to impact a huge number of students system-wide. So I'm so excited about that.
It is huge.
Rolling out.
I just want to add one other piece, which is the same mindset that we are endeavoring to shift across the state, the mindset that obtains with developmental math and English students. There's a deficit mindset. I mean, the language sounds really harsh and not good, but the reality is many of our faculty and our institutions are set up to receive students assuming a major deficit, that they're just not equipped. You're not college level. We will even say that to our students. You're coming into us, but you're not college ready. And this placement test shows us this. So there's a mindset shift that does need to take place on the part of our faculty, believing in the capacity of all our students, accurately trying to assess where they enter in terms of reaching their ultimate educational goals, and then believing in students' capacity to such an extent that the student understands and receives that and understands it within the classroom context. My faculty, my peers, we're all in the same place, and there's a belief that we can succeed. And I think it's not a namby-pamby type of notion. It has real heft and value to it. And our students are already telling us this in the context of math and English, when many of our schools have already moved forward with implementing AB 705 in math and English across this past year. So I just want to be able to chime in with that, because it does also apply to our ESL students, that we have to have a mindset that really believes in the capacity for major progress and learning for our students and our faculty.
Great. So thank you for that. So the next topic that I want to talk about is thinking about a shared vision. So we know colleges across the state are currently being challenged to meet new goals, like those encompassed in the Vision for Success, and adapt new reforms like AB 705 and guided pathways. Think about the new funding formula, which are intended to improve student outcomes and equity. So we wanted to give our panel an opportunity to talk about how are colleges and faculty buying into this vision? How are they taking on the challenges and opportunities that come with that?
So one thing I would like to shout about is a new innovation that at Cypress College. So we just recently got approval from the Chancellor's office. They are called Guided Pathway ESL Milestone Certificates. So they are credit certificates approved by the Chancellor's office, 18 to 19 units that will be transcripted. And what is amazingly wonderful about these is that they really bring the best of all of the things that are going on in the system right now. So it's guided pathways is in there, AB 705, touching to the advancement of ESL as a foreign language, high advanced foreign language. But what they are is students will complete at Cypress College the three highest levels of ESL and a prerequisite or foundational course in their pathway. So we have 9 certificates along our various pathways, not all of them yet, but hopefully soon. For example, based on our Cypress College local research, we found that a majority of our students are SEM, science, engineering, math. And so we created a certificate for them, and they will complete the highest levels of ESL, college algebra, and then a chem physics course. So they're completing the advanced foreign language ESL with prerequisite or foundational courses in their pathway, and they will earn a certificate, a significant milestone in their progress towards degree or transfer or certificate in another area. We also have airline travel careers at our college, and a number of ESL students go into that area. So they complete the highest levels of ESL. One of the prerequisite courses in ATC and then they earn a certificate. So it's really just a very significant recognition of what they are doing. And system-wide, I think what is so significant is that it really involves the best of our system. So local research, my research office, counseling, articulation. I got the brainstorm at a Academic Senate for Community Colleges Curriculum Institute workshop last year. Worked with the Chancellor's office to kind of refine them, curriculum. I mean, it goes just all around. And what is wonderful is that they will now go back to the students. When I talk to my students about these certificates, so many of them just perk up, like, what? And I say, you are probably eligible for a number of certificates. And I, what? They're so thrilled. I mean, so thrilled. And I think it's just a significant recognition of what they have already done and are continuing to do on their pathway to their educational goals. So I think that in terms of opportunities, one of the ways to create these, I think, responsive innovations to all of the different initiatives that are going on in the state. I think that it's created through education and engagement with the initiatives. So I think these were created out of the engagement in guided pathways, AB 705, program review, collaboration across our campus. So I feel like these certificates are just representative of like the best in our system, and in the end, ESL students benefit highly, and I'm so thrilled.
Okay. Awesome. Student-centered funding formula too.
And they fulfill the student-centered funding formula by the Christian life. So yes, so all of those initiatives.
I just want to add, because I think that what those certificates also really demonstrate nicely is integrating ESL students into the college on a, Alice was talking about the importance of all of us having a belief and a faith in our students and what they're able to do, and sharing that with them in every facet of the work that we do, and certainly creating opportunities like Kathy's certificates, or Cypress's certificates, I should say, achieve that. Recently I was interviewing an instructor at Consumnes River College about their program. One of the things that they do is that they invite professors from other disciplines into their class, especially professors who themselves perhaps are non-native English speakers, to talk about language expectations in their classes. They also take field trips to classes in other disciplines that their students express an interest in, and other things like that. So there are many ways that we can show our students that we see them moving forward into those pathways and into degree and certificate and transfer completion opportunities. And by creating those opportunities, we're perhaps inspiring our students to go further than they might have thought for themselves that they would.
Great. And as colleges are confronting these different reforms and trying to achieve this vision, what support do you think is necessary from at the college level and at the system level, and what is available or coming out in the future to support colleges as they move towards?
Well, the Chancellor's office has a number of key partners. One of our most important partners is our Senate, our statewide Senate. There's a range of professional development opportunities for our faculty working with the curriculum in order to affect AB 705 for ESL students. I think more of the professional development is going to be coming this late summer, early fall, as our ESL faculty and staff across the state gear up to full implementation in fall 2020. We also have CAP as a partner, 3CSN, the RP group, a whole range of professional development. For example, the RP group, their researchers, their MMAP researchers who have worked with AB 705 in all these contexts, they've been running a series of workshops for the researchers. All of our IR our institutional researchers at our campuses, to be able to really familiarize them with what to evaluate, how to garner the data, and what to be attuned to in terms of helping and supporting their colleges and their faculty with what to study and what to draw from this research. That's been really popular. They're going to be at Mesa College on the 10th. They've just rolled out all this spring. They've been doing a lot of professional development. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and our advisory committee's been really encouraging the colleges to also to do a lot of work internally on their colleges. One big piece that we've really promoted is for our ESL faculty to get together with our English department faculty to be able to really build bridges and understand how they can work together. One of the things that we've also encouraged, one of the strategies, is that ESL instructors be able to teach, who have the min quals, be able to teach those composition courses, English composition, which is our transfer level, and be able to teach that for our ESL students coming into those courses. So that's some of the internal college level professional development in reach that can be done, and we're doing a lot of professional development across the state. I think our biggest challenge is communicating all that's going on and having a central place to be able to let the field know what's happening. We can always improve there. We have a lot still to do.
I think with ESL, some of the support that is needed is just the empowerment, I guess, in engaging the campus community, the system, other colleges, because I think in so many ways, many times ESL is overlooked. Not necessarily intentionally, but they're just overlooked. And then even when we got into the law and got a different timeline and things like this, because our timeline is 2020, in a lot of ways we're being overlooked. And so I think ESL faculty feel like they're constantly just trying to catch up, even though we're not supposed to be catching up. So I think that that professional development, that engagement, all of that is very, very critical.
I know that in our professional development events through CAP, what faculty consistently ask for is, what are other colleges doing? What are other colleges doing? So opportunities to network and see examples of how each other are responding to the changes is another really important way that we can support each other. And any resources that we can create, whether it's through independent organizations like CAP, but ideally through places like the Chancellor's office or Vision for Success website or wherever it's going to live. Resources that colleges can access that show them course sequences, that show them placement tools or things like that they can learn from and figure out what they want to develop locally that's going to achieve those ends.
Okay, great. So I think we've reached time for our panel discussion, but there's one other topic that I wanted to cover. Some of if those of you that I interview are in the room or probably already know this. I always run over time, but but this is I think an important topic. So it was already touched upon briefly, the use of non-credit ESL and kind of how the role it's going to play after AB 705. So we know that colleges have for a long time either offered through partnerships with adult schools or by linking their credit ESL pathways to non-credit or offering mirrored sequences with the credit and non-credit ESL. But as we spoke to colleges, we found that non-credit appears to be becoming even more important, especially as a strategy to possibly shorten credit sequences. So if you guys could talk a little bit about how you guys envision this non-credit and credit working together moving forward, and also to ensure some people might see this as maybe a workaround to ensure AB 705 compliance. So how do we ensure that this is rolled out equitably and that there are seamless transitions if colleges are creating a non-credit pathway that is supposed to feed into the credit pathway?
Well, the first caveat is you may be shortening, a college may have a strategy or a vision to shorten a credit sequence for ESL students in order to fit into that 5+1 semester framework, if you will, for AB 705, but you're not handling time to completion if you're adding on a whole subset of non-credit courses that students have to work through in order to get to the credit. So that's, and I doubt many colleges are choosing that strategy. I'm not sure. I mean, we have a great deal of autonomy among our colleges, so that may be happening. I think more importantly, what to promote and talk to our colleges about with the non-credit sequences or non-credit courses is really helping students who are currently in non-credit classes understand their options in the credit side of the house, and understand that if their educational goals really do include those credit courses and working toward transfer or degree, that those options are available to them. That's that sort of seamless transition. The mirroring of classes is really helpful, a mirroring non-credit to credit, because it helps students save money, because they could enroll from the non-credit side of that mirrored course and save money, but they're still getting credit for the credit course. So that's something that we've definitely been promoting, and I know our curriculum committee, the statewide curriculum committee, has been very active in promoting that, and we've been approving those mirrored courses.
I've talked to a number of colleges recently that are mirroring. They're starting from lower levels and then just sort of moving up, like kind of seeing how far they can go with it, because mirroring really expands access to the courses to a wider range of students. And so rather than, I've seen more of that actually early on. I think some colleges, when the focus was sort of on how do we get ourselves down to 5 semesters, right? People were thinking like, we'll just make our lowest one non-credit, that's the workaround. I think people are increasingly understanding that that's not in the spirit of AB 705, and but I do see more colleges moving toward mirroring to expand access to those academic credit courses and sequences to students who haven't been served by them in the past. And so I think it's an exciting move to see that happening. Another thing that I see is colleges sort of developing flow charts that present clear transition points for students who would move from non-credit to credit, and also ensuring that they can do that without taking an additional assessment. And something that my own college is trying, we don't have a non-credit program, but we do work with our adult schools, and we see the lack of students transitioning, right? Students are at adult school and they're not moving on to the college, but next year we're going to try offering our advanced ESL credit course at the adult school as a college transition course for students who, then they'll get 6 credits of college ESL, and we'll have access to them to promote the opportunities of college and see if we can get more of them making that move, because there's sort of a fear that's keeping people from making that transition. So there's a lot of different ways that people are, that colleges and adult schools, non-credit programs and continuing ed programs are working to support students to do that.
Well, and also there's, been another initiative in the past. So if any of you are familiar with AB 86, in 2013, and then it changed to AEBG in 2015, and recently changed, formerly known as, now CAEP, right? So that hopefully what's happening at the campuses is working to transition non-credit ESL to credit ESL, making that seamless transition under that initiative that was happening even before AB 705. So hopefully with many of the colleges, ESL faculty and people on campus, all of the parties on campus are not spinning in separate silos. This is, CAEP, formerly known as, and then AB 705. Hopefully everybody's kind of all working together for that same goal.
Great. So now I'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you very much for this informative session. Thank you. Okay, great. My question is regarding community outreach, particularly within the minority communities about AB, this new assembly bill. Can you talk about that and what the colleges are doing to engage the community, particularly the minority community, on these changes?
Well, I would say that many colleges, including my own, have been dizzy just from understanding how AB 705 impacts our colleges. And so I think the outward, deliberate, intentional community outreach related to this has not always happened just yet. But with, for example, our ESL Guided Pathways milestone certificates and the potential for us to fulfill the transfer requirements for under humanities, once we get those two pieces, that other piece in place, we are doing a massive community outreach because so many of our students in our area have the goal of degree or transfer. So we definitely will be reaching out to the community in that sense. But I would say, at least for my college, my department, we've been working so hard just to piece everything else together that it's sort of been insular. And once things get more settled, then we're definitely going to be like blasting it out there.
Hi, so I'm at American River College here in Sacramento, and I have a question about assessment instruments. Ms. Perez mentioned that the Chancellor's Office understands that we're not going to just be doing away completely with assessment instruments, but I'd like to know what kind of help and guidance are we going to get in piloting other assessment instruments, because we've been told that AccuPlacer and KELSA are both going to be going away. And at the same time, sorry, I'll try to wrap this up, the idea of full implementation by fall of 2020, and yet it's now the beginning of May 2019. How are we going to do this?
Right, so really a really important point of clarification, and KELSA's not going away. KELSA's been extended. It's still on the Chancellor's Office website of approved. That's in our latest memo as well. It explicitly states. So the KELSA has not been expired, and no college has to go to the Board of Governors to appeal and ask for KELSA to be approved. It's already approved, and we've extended it. Also, AccuPlacer, there are a number of modules that some of our colleges are using for ESL placement, and those modules are extant, and they're Mia Keeley is the dean responsible for keeping that list and keeping it updated and green. So they have not gone away for our to be used for ESL placement. Those that have not gone away. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have the paperwork, but even with AccuPlacer, if we're not entirely satisfied with AccuPlacer and how accurate AccuPlacer has been, and we want to explore other instruments, there is no information in the guidelines about what the process would be for us to ask if other instruments could be approved. I don't even know who I would talk to about who will be approving new instruments.
So that's a really good question. So you definitely want to work with the Chancellor's Office. The Dean for all of curriculum is Raul Arambula. You can also reach out to me. And if you have a whole new instrument that you've never used before that you would like to bring forward and have approved, I mean, I imagine we would entertain that. Another important memo just went out to the field about guided placement and self-placement for students. And so that's another avenue that colleges are choosing to look at and to innovate and to be able to sort of test drive, if you will. So I know that a number of our ESL departments are also devising some of those guided placement instruments for students, which is they are not approved standardized placement tests, but they are innovations that the field are trying in order to bring those to bear for placement in the AB 705 landscape. And there's a whole 2-year provisional approval of those GSP instruments so that the field can study them, can look at how the placement is working, how effective they are and viable for placement for our students. And that's not barred for ESL students at all. And a number of colleges are working on those types of guided placement strategies. And they're different than that AccuPlacer or CELSA or other tests per se. They're sort of branching decision trees that students walk through, and they're answering a battery of questions that help them understand where they think they should be placed in the sequence that's offered at their college. But you should definitely reach out to me, and then I can work with you if you have a whole new instrument that you haven't used and it's not in the approved ESL bank of tests.
There are two, as far as I
Okay.
There's in the bank.
Okay.
That would be the problem.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if you have another test that you've already been using, and as it
We haven't been using anything because the assumption has been up until now that probably we were not going to be allowed to use an assessment instrument. And I mean common assumption, just people not in the know.
So we did say back in July, and I know it's been hard because English and math have been zooming forward with their context, but we have said in our ESL guidance that this is the third memo that's come out. We have said all along, you're not banned from using assessment instruments for ESL placement. But if you have other instruments you want to query and have brought forward, then let me know and we can look into that.
Another question here? All right, two more. We can do this one first, and then.
So given that I think you guys did a good job of showing the opportunities that come with this bill, and so just going back to the idea of the accelerated vision for this bill and like the deficit mindset that is very ingrained in our culture, I just wanted to kind of get more ideas on like how we can even begin to like have this conversation and like kind of tackle that, given that it's not only college ESL but like English learners and so many other groups of students who are facing these issues. So I kind of just, what are your thoughts on how we start that whole idea?
There's an amazing student group out of City College of San Francisco called Students Making a Change, SMAC or SMAC. They have a very vocal and presence in our state. They usually come to all of our Board of Governors meetings. I just recommend connecting with them because they're reaching out to statewide to as many students as possible around these issues of voice, agency, students representing their voice and their rights in the world of AB 705. There's also a video that the Chancellor's office, it's on the Chancellor's office website and it has gone out statewide, but it's from the student perspective on how AB 705 is impacting students and the potentials and the promise of AB 705 for students. So I would definitely go on and just Google that and find that film. That's something that can be shared broadly. Again, the student perspective is really front and center in that film, but the student perspective has really been what's driving a lot of our work with the Vision for Success, because we're trying to remove barriers that have chronically not served students well in terms of reaching their educational goals. So I hope those were helpful pointers, my response. There may be other things that Kathy and
what I
Melissa
wanted to add to that is really in the ESL context, that perspective of the deficit-minded attitude. I think the law that recognizes ESL students as engaged in foreign language and not the same as development, I mean, English, is just, monumental. Because I don't know if any of you have studied or learned a foreign language, but as you have, I'm sure you recognize right away that your inability to speak, write, read in that foreign language has no reflection of your ability to navigate in your primary language. And so I think that this is one major accomplishment to revision non-native speakers in the state of California. And so that to me is a huge one, and I cannot wait for it to reverberate across the state even more. I think events like this that get out to a wider audience, so it's not, just ESL faculty preaching to the choir and everyone's like, yes, amen. When you get beyond that, I think that's where it can make the biggest difference, especially like on my campus, where when I will tell other faculty, if I go to France and I try to engage in the university in French, to study geography, like this is a very high level, and that's what our students are doing. So to me, as the deficit-minded approach applies to ESL, I think that the language of the AB 705 and what we're doing to advance ESL really shatters that.
I just want to pick up really quick on what Kathy's talking about. I think that within our institutions, it's important that we engage at least our English faculty together with ESL, but also faculty across disciplines to really challenge old assumptions about what it reflects about a student's capability across a wide range of subjects if that student has the markers of a non-native speaker in her writing. Just as any of us, if we try to imagine ourselves engaging in university life in France or whatever else, we know that our language probably wouldn't come out perfectly, but that wouldn't be reflective of our intellectual capacity. We've been willing always to accept that people who receive their education in foreign countries, right, all the way through the university or even graduate degrees, and obviously whose English sounds foreign, those people are working in this country as executives and professors and doctors and, all these high-level positions. And we don't question, like, well, I don't know, my doctor's English sounds kind of funny. I don't know if it's a real doctor, but somehow when our own students who are, receiving their education in the state of California are moving through the levels of their education with some markers in their English that makes it sound, say, different than mine, we have a tendency to question whether that person is really functioning, in their other academic disciplines. And I think that that's something that we really need to engage that conversation and say, hey, we have a diverse population in the state of California. We have an incredibly diverse population of learners in our California Community College and our CSU and UC systems and so on. And it shouldn't be our baseline assumption that English language, native-like proficiency, however that's defined, is a basic skill, and that without it, students aren't able to do other things, right? Students are able to do tremendous things with widely varying English, and we need to recognize that.
Great. So another question back there.
Okay, I wasn't going to take it. My name is Shirley Darling, and I used to teach ESL, and I tutor. 2 points. Professors and part-time teachers need to be culturally aware, because when there is a miscommunication from the student or the teacher, sometimes that causes something that will make the student not want to come back or feel totally discouraged. And many students are working, taking care of children, doing all kinds of things. So going to college is a huge commitment. And the other thing is, when I was teaching, one thing I noticed very markedly was when students talk to other people on campus in English, it makes such a big difference. So opportunities for using the language outside of class are so important. And that means they need to be comfortable in interacting. And sometimes that's a scary place. So I just wanted to throw that out. Thank you.
Other questions from the audience?
Question, I've already asked the question. So.
Yeah.
Hi. Former Fullerton College alumni, by the way. But I was just wondering, in terms of financial aid for these students, I know I don't want to get into like that whole thing, but even with the 3-year change, the length of college for these students is longer than most. And so I was just wondering what kind of moves were being made in terms of maybe like lengthening Cal Grants or adding additional funding for these students so that they can get it earlier in the years, especially if they're coming over and starting. They don't qualify for residency yet, and they might not have that financial aid available.
You know, what I can say about that is that there's a current bill being reviewed now to expand Pell Grant eligibility and Cal Grant financial package, increasing the financial package that's available for our students. Our segment of public higher ed for the community colleges, we receive the least. It's the kind of the lowest of the low in terms of those packages that are available for financial aid. So that's one piece. We've been really agitating. Laura Mattoon, if you don't know her, she's an extraordinary individual, and she works with government relations outside of our office. Out of the Chancellor's office. So she's really worked hard, and the legislature's looking at a bill that could be could profoundly impact the students' ability to garner more financial aid. Your point's well taken. I mean, the vision for success really illuminates and drives forward a completion agenda and an equity agenda. And financial aid and students' ability to take what they need to take to get through college is all part of that. To be able to complete in a timely way and to be able to close some of our achievement and equity gaps. So the financial aid piece is on our radar, and now we've really been getting the legislature to pay attention. Governor Newsom is also very attentive to that. So I'm expecting good things. I think it's SB 291, if I'm getting the number right, but I think it's looking good so far, and we'll just have to see how it goes through the chambers.
I want to say something that I was interested to see in this study was that taking an ESL class that counted for transfer credit was the highest predictor that a student would transfer, right? And the interesting thing to me about that was just recently I was talking to, again, the faculty at Consumnes River who are shifting the shape of their sequence. Their ESL sequence historically was, I think, 6 levels wide and 5 skill levels, 6 levels deep, 5 skill levels wide, and all of the classes, like 40 units worth, counted as elective credit for transfer. And they had done that for the reason that students could receive financial aid, but it was 40 units, and students were using their financial aid up doing ESL, and it's only elective credit, right? So they have just, one of the big changes they have made and are in the process of making in their reshaping of their sequence is only having classes at the very top count for transfer units, and because they realized that students were just burning through their financial aid. So I think then some of the other moves, like Kathy was talking about, having ESL classes count more meaningfully toward transfer. If they're going to count for units toward transfer, that they not be elective credit, but that they maybe count for the humanities, or advanced ESL speaking class can count for the comm requirements, or things like that. That could be another way that if students are taking classes that count towards transfer and receiving that financial aid, that's actually satisfying some transfer requirements and not just units.
I'm a little distressed to hear you use that expression, burn through units, because we have almost 2,000 students at American River College. That's our last unduplicated student head count, or whatever that's called. So not all of our students have the same goals. And I realize that AB 705 is supposed to be designed for degree-seeking students, and everyone is on board with the idea that you want to do whatever you can to help students get through and get to where they need to go. But the fact that so many of our students put down a degree goal is a little bit of false advertising, because they're forced to do that to get financial aid to be able to be at college and get that English that they need. And so this focus on only students who want to transfer is a disservice to so many of our students who, in their wildest dreams, and I'm not saying they aren't capable of it, of course they're capable of it, and you want every student to know that they're capable of that. But the reality on the ground is that they're coming to us and they need help where they are right now. I would encourage more students to go to adult school first and get the basic English that they need, so when they come to us, they are completely successful. But we welcome everyone who comes to us. And so we're offering courses that are where they are. So I don't know if I'm making just the point of, it's not as easy as we just change which courses are transferable, because that's going to help all of our students. Not all of our students are interested in transferring, and so we should be able to offer them what they're looking for, right? What they need.
Well, if they're
So some of those elective courses, if you want to be in a nursing program, having strong speaking and listening skills, those aren't elective skills. Those are necessary skills to achieve success in your major courses and to be successful in completing your degree.
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. The program I was talking about, which is in your district, so you're probably familiar with their moves, like they're not eliminating those courses. What I was saying was that they shifted the course numbering of their courses so that they are not considered transfer level. There's still credit ESL courses, and they still have the skills courses in the different skill areas, but there was a different limit on financial aid eligibility for transfer level coursework, and students were using the transfer level financial aid eligibility, completing the ESL program, because so many of the courses were coded as transferable. So it was a recoding. It is not to say that students coming to that college can no longer take a speaking listening course, or that the only things available are the path to transfer level English. And everywhere in the memos that have come out from the AB 705 work group have also supported colleges continuing to offer skill area courses in addition to the sequence to the transfer level course. I can say that a great topic of conversation in the AB 705 working group, as my colleagues can attest, has been not all of our students are alike, and not all of our students want the same goal, and being in a credit ESL program does not in and of itself signify that that student wants to complete a degree or transfer. So we're quite aware of the great diversity of student goals.
Okay, so so the authors and the panelists will be able to stay for a little longer. So if you have questions, but we want to please join me in thanking our panel for this excellent discussion. We're really happy that they were able to join us, and thank you for your interest in our research. This information is available on our website, so you can have access to the slides and the report, and also very detailed technical appendix. So thank you.
Thank you.